So hopefully everyone had a fantastic weekend. Um, it was a hot one. I'm assuming it probably was where you were too, but it was a hot one. Let me see here. So Stephanie, I know you don't have your camera on and that's okay, but Stephanie won the Kahoot. Yay. Um, but the crazy thing was that um Crystal, who I haven't seen here, um, she got the exact same, they both got 87%, which is amazing. Um, those were the only two that took it, but yay. Um, you can always, I can send them out again. Not going to do prizes all, for the rest of the world, but um, you can always take them again if you want to. So did she just drop off? Okay. She was like, fine, I passed it. I'm out of here. All right. So let's get started with our last week. But again, doesn't mean you lose me or you lose the material. It's always going to be there um, till the internet's gone. So we're talking about facilitating meetings. We're talking about the facilitation guide, and then we're going to do a huge chunk of test taking tips and tricks because I really think that's probably one of your biggest areas for most people. So here's one of our pages that is pulled out. Um, I will be honest with you. I have a feeling that what they got from this page is the term community planning groups, because there's really nothing else that they would have got from here. So community planning groups is just, let's say you have a coalition and you've got a group of people who are like, we want to do the planning piece of it. That's a community planning group. That's all that is. Or it might be, separate from a coalition and it's the people who do the planning. If you were thinking of like school-based stuff, that might be you and the counselor at the school. It's really that simple. Um, but what they talked about here and then on the next page is um, some details about it, but really I think that's I've seen questions that use that term, so I think that's probably what it is. So just know if you see and they do sometimes call it CPG, which I don't think they would do that on the test, but if they do, community planning group. Um, Here's the other one. Um, Talking about having operational procedures. You may have heard of Robert's Rules of Order. For those of us who are really old, we might remember that from school. They don't really talk about that anymore, but Robert's Rules of Order is a really old set of this is how you run a meeting. You may have been in a meeting where they said, I propose this, I second, all in favor, aye, all opposed, nay. That is some of those Robert Rules of Order. They're not going to ask you, what is this rule? But that term is probably going to be in a question. And all you need to know about it is that kind of establishes process or what you do in a meeting, including a community planning group. So like some of the things here, it says how to the speaking order, how to take motions, how to decide various types of questions. Do not have Robert's Rules of Orders memorized by any means. Of course, you can look it up if you'd like, but nobody that I know has ever gone through and memorized all that. Um, so the fact that it is a call out, I would say it's probably because they use that in a sentence, it might be something like, when running your community planning group, Robert's Rules of Order can help you decide. And then it might be things like, how to establish a speaking order, what programs to use, which we know that that's not it. Just know that Robert's Rules of Order is all about process of running a meeting. That's kind of all for that. The facilitation guide for people in prevention. This has got a lot of really nice like graphics and charts and things that you could fill out to help you run a meeting. Most of this stuff for most of us on here is very intuitive, and we're like, oh yeah, we've been doing it that way for years. But it's showing you how to do it in a very methodical way. Just like if we were to think through some decisions we've made, we probably did things like the spiff all of our life. It's the same kind of thing for this. Um, Specifically gives a little definition of what a facilitator is, which a facilitator doesn't necessarily have to be an expert on something, but has to be an expert on how to move people through a process. When we're talking about facilitation, they talk about all three of these. Sometimes we think about facilitation, we just think about delivery, but there's so much in preparation and follow-up that get dropped off sometimes. So if you see a question that says, when facilitating a group, which of the following is not part of the process, it would probably be these three and then something else. But know that preparation, delivery, and follow-up are all part of that. So the rest of this little guide kind of goes through tools, tips, ideas for each of those processes. So in the preparation phase, these are the things you need to think about. Why are we meeting? A meeting just to look at each other is not an effective meeting, right? So what is our intended goal? What do we think we want to get out of this? What's actually going on? What's the situation? So let's just say this is a coalition meeting. I've got a suicide coalition prevention coalition meeting tomorrow. Why are we meeting? I'd have to look at the proposed agenda, but I think what they're doing right now is figuring out what the first product is they want to do. What's the situation? So we've already got our leadership for the coalition. We're building up our membership. Who's coming? Well, I could look at the email and see all the people that are listed on the email. What will we do? That's where we look at the agenda. So agendas have to be given out early. And then what are the logistics? Well, for this meeting, there is an in-person and there's a online version. So that's some of those details. Also in the details, you'd have to figure out, what room are we meeting in person? Where, do we have enough chairs? All of those kind of details. So as far as a test question, I could see them, going through a meeting and saying, what is missing? So don't worry about memorizing these exactly, but just know that when you're planning a meeting, you got to really think about everything. So here's some of those documents that I think are really beyond the test. I think that these are good documents to look at and think about. This one is, how do you figure out some of these things like the situation? What's the purpose of the meeting? Why are we doing this? If it's just to tell each other what we're doing, that can be an email. That can be a Word doc, Um, what are some of the needs? What are the events that's related to what we're doing? So just looking through this, I think it's a good document. As well as this one. I'm not sure how they could make this into a test question because again, it's all multiple choice. Um, but I think it's more that there is a process. Um, so you would say maybe the focus question is the first event for the Suicide Prevention Coalition. And then you could go out here and fill in these things, and that'll help you flesh out exactly what you're going to talk about. Look at I of all of the documents we've looked at, I think this one has some of the most um, useful forms and things like that. When you're looking at who's coming, obviously, who do you expect to come? What do you think that those different people could contribute? If I'm asked to come to a meeting, I want to know that I have some reason to be there. Are there any special needs? This is kind of that community or cultural competency piece of it. Are we making sure that the space is accessible? Which is why I think they did the in-person and virtual option for the meeting tomorrow. Are there any things that we need to think about, like people coming early or people who want to come and do a speech, that kind of thing. They do have blank forms in the book if you want to use it. And I know that, we look at this stuff and we're like, oh my God, that's so stupid. That's so basic. But sometimes for some meetings, we need to get that basic piece. Like, what will we do? You can specifically list out what you're supposed to do. And then you see where it says rational aim and experiential aim, that would come back to this. So, what will you explore? What decisions will be made? And what will the group experience? So, if you are, working through the spiff, you might experience frustration. You might experience, teamwork, whatever. So, I wanted to show you guys these forms because, yes, there might be some test questions here, but also I think that these are very useful. All right. This next list, I am 99% sure there's going to be a test question coming out of this list. So this is listing techniques for a facilitator. So we're going to talk through these and I want you guys to give me some examples. So mirroring is where you repeat back the exact words that somebody said.
It's also body language, right? Like body language and tone and
Um, it can be, but when we're talking about listening techniques, um, so what would be an example of that?
so like what would be an example of what, Elise?
Oh, I said so saying like, so what I'm hearing you say is, and then
And this
Well,
one,
that's
it would be the
paraphrasing.
exact words.
mhm.
Ah, okay.
So, which will be different than paraphrasing. So if I said to you, mirroring is telling someone exactly what they said to you, you would say,
Mirroring is something. Wait, say that we would repeat that exactly what you said.
let's
We
just
won't.
let's make it easy. So, I love Mickey Mouse.
You love Mickey
So
Mouse.
mirroring would be,
You love Mickey Mouse or I love Mickey Mouse? Do we say you or I?
or you could say, I hear that you like Mickey
Okay.
Mouse. That's just saying back exactly. I know it sounds silly,
Okay. Gotcha.
but that very well could be a question. Which of the following is an example of mirroring? And then it would give you a statement and then it would give you options. Paraphrasing it is when you're saying it in like a different way. So if I said, Kings Island is a fun amusement park near me that I love to go to, paraphrasing might be,
Oh, I hear you love to go to Kings Island, that it's a great amusement park.
yes, exactly. So you're not saying the exact same words, but you're saying something very similar with the same gist to it. Um, Drawing out is where you're trying to get more out of a person. So if I said, I love to read, what might be a drawing out comment you could say?
Always
Oh, tell me more about that. What kind of books do you like to read?
fiction, nonfiction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And as you can see, these are all just building rapport type things too. Encouraging would be when you try to get other people to maybe help kind of do that drawing out process. So I might say, I don't know. If Kathleen, I'm just going to pick on you for a second. If Kathleen is talking and talking and talking, I might say, Shannon, is there anything else that you could add that, might tell us a little bit more about what Kathleen's thinking? Just encouraging some other people to say some things. That's if you can't get some people to talk. Stacking is kind of, no, I don't know if I want to say the opposite, but if 5 of you all wanted to say something, I could say, you know what? Let's do it this way. Let's have Kathleen go first, then Sabrina, then Shannon, then Amber. Then you've got kind of an order. So you're stacking who's going to talk. Tracking is where you might say, so I heard Sabrina say that she likes the color blue, and Shannon say she likes the color green, and Kathleen likes the blue green. So, maybe we can put those together. So you're tracking, you're letting people know that they were heard, and you're kind of um, mushing it. My favorite one is intentional silence. And it drives a lot of people crazy. And I know that's not a very PC thing to say, but it does. Um, I love intentional silence because I'm one of those people, if we're in a meeting and everyone's talking and there's no silent space, I'm just going to be silent. But if there's space, there's that intentional silence, you'll get people to say things that you might not see or you might not hear. So I can appreciate that. When you are facilitating, intentional silence is so good though. Because if I said something like, does anybody have any ideas on what we could do with A, B, and C? I wait 2 seconds and then I continue on. I'm not giving people a chance to really think about it. But if I said, you know what, let's take about 30 seconds to sit and think, and then we'll move on. One of my I don't know who I try to model my life after, Mr. Rogers. If you've ever seen his speech when he won an award, and he tells the whole crowd to sit and think for 30 seconds about someone who made a difference in their lives. And the first maybe 10 seconds of it feels very awkward, but after that, it feels so good. So yes, intentional silence can be very frustrating, but it is probably one of the best of these techniques. And then, of course, the last one is listening for common ground. So you've got, 5 different people saying things, and you have to listen and go, you know what? I think you guys are all talking about the same kind of thing, just in different ways. So I know we spent a lot of time on this, but I have seen, and in fact, page 29, when they specifically talk about some of these, it's going to be on the test. Yeah, absolutely, Stephanie. So Stephanie says, I do this in a suicide support survivor support group. Sometimes they just need to think through their thoughts. I am, and I know you guys are going to think I'm telling a lie, but I'm telling you the truth. I am an extreme introvert. I need that time to think through something. And that's okay. Um, but if we don't give people that time, we're going to miss out on a lot. So I would definitely look through these, and when you look through them, either in the booklet or on the slides in the notes, it tells all the definitions of them. This, of course, they do pull out specifically, and this basically just is a kind of a case study or talks through some of these techniques. Questions on any of those? Because a lot of times I've seen sample questions about that. All right, still in the delivery of our facilitation, looking at focused conversation. When you've got to get each one of these pieces in, and you're going to be doing it by a lot of these different things. So we want to get the facts. So the first thing I might say to you is tell me a little bit about what you do. Then how do you feel about that? Does that seem to work for you? What do you think about when you realize that? Then you look at what do you feel your meaning is or your purpose is in doing that? What have you learned from doing that? And then getting that deeper sharing and figuring out how to make a resolution. These are all things that you guys do naturally anyways. It's just giving you words to describe it. Again, this is not something I would memorize. I would not worry as much about this, but just knowing that it's more than just talking. This may be confusing because they talk about well-constructed workshop. We're not talking workshop like a training. When they use the word workshop, they're talking about, you might have heard like, let's workshop this. Let's figure this out. Let's do a meeting to kind of brainstorm this. That's what they mean by a workshop. It, I don't know why they use that word, but so when we're talking workshop in this way, we're talking about making sure that there's a focus. Again, we're not going to all just come together just to look at each other and stare. Brainstorming, which the biggest thing with brainstorming that I think people forget is when you brainstorm, you are supposed to put down everything. A lot of times people will filter brainstorming. Like when I do my ethics classes, I tell people to brainstorm possible solutions, and everyone always tells me all the ethical ones. I'm like, you guys never thought about any unethical things? Well, yeah, but we didn't put those down. You're supposed to put everything down. So if I said, let's brainstorm, um, how we could get from here to Florida, walking would be one. Now, are we going to do that? No, but that is one brainstorming piece. We could say walking, driving, riding a bike, doing a skateboard, flying. All of those would be things you'd write down. You wouldn't want to filter it until later. You could hitchhike, not the safest, but yes, absolutely put that down, because if that's part of the brainstorming, then you put that down, because then after you brainstorm, then you cluster those elements. You might have one cluster that is unsafe ways. So, hitchhiking would be probably unsafe, impractical. You might have a cluster that's impractical. You might have a cluster that's expensive. Flying is not very cheap. Um, flying private airplane, not very cheap. But you would cluster all those. Then you could name the clusters. Okay, so this is the um, unsafe. This is the takes too long. This is the too expensive. This is the probably could work. And then you get the group in to kind of focus in on um, where or what might be some good solutions.
So Jennifer, I just gotta say the hitchhike thing. My brother had to travel to another state and like, he's a guy, right? Hitchhike, but it was like, oh, wait a minute, I got so and so is moving and they're gonna be driving. They could use help driving. So hitchhike is not reasonable. But because someone said that, then they found out. So that's the
Exactly.
beauty of brainstorming. So that's why I put it in there.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. When somebody says something, what I always think about is way back when I was in high school, I was in this group and we were brainstorming things that we wanted to do for the group. And one person said, let's make the group was called GYC. Let's make a GYC debit card. We were all like, what? But just like Kathleen said, we then moved into, well, maybe we have like an ID card for everybody. So yes, that's fantastic example of why throwing everything out is a good idea. When I say throw it out, put it all down. All right. Um, again, some of their words, uh, I'm not sure what they mean by the certification option, but this is all the things that you would do following up. Managing the event, managing the process. So that's different. So um, if you are putting on uh, let's say you're putting on a speaker event, you want to manage the event, but also the processes. Did we get the person here on time? Did we have the right microphone for them? Did we get the participants in on time? Um, that's part of that process that would be different than the event or the outcome. Managing the individuals and groups, managing your learning. Again, when we're looking, I always go back to when I first started in prevention and I would hear that a grant wanted us to have, I'm just going to make up something, 100 people come through and we only had 80. I would think, oh my gosh, we failed. We're going to lose the grant and it's over. But a big part of
Managing
this
the
follow-up
events.
is managing your learning. So if the
Managing
learning was, we didn't hit our goal because
But I
we
can't wait to
realized
get
we
to
did
my
this
brother
and we
because he's
figured
gonna
that
give me
out.
some. God,
Kathleen, you unmuted. Did you want to say something?
oh.
As long as you didn't say anything about me, that's fine. But managing your learning is an important piece of that. All right, so they do have these forms as well. The checklists, again, if you are doing something big, you want to use these, go for it, because I think they did a good job in some of these forms. I'm not intentionally trying to speed through this, but I'm giving you what I think is important. All right, getting started in a meeting. These are some of the things that, again, we do a lot of this just naturally, but this is just giving you that specific outline of what to do. So always want to start out with your welcome. Hi, everybody. So glad you could be here. Let's take a minute and everyone introduce themselves, or let's take a minute and say either pancakes or waffles, no explanation. That's one of my favorites. If it's your first time together, you probably want to talk about group norms. Any logistical information, bathrooms are down that way. We will take a break about halfway through. You can eat and drink here, that's fine, that kind of thing. Goals and expectations. By the end of this, we're hoping that we can come up with, um, you know, two things that we're going to do before next one. go over your agenda, and then quickly move on. The other piece about follow-up is that you have to follow these steps. And a lot of times we do number 1, but 2 and 3 sometimes get missed. So as far as a test question, even though this wasn't specifically called out, I could see that there might be a question about, is evaluation part of a follow-up for a meeting? Is documentation part? Yes. And I'll be honest, the documentation part is probably one that I miss a lot. But let's say we were having our meeting, we said, okay, we're all done now. The evaluation piece may be that you give everyone an evaluation at the end of the meeting. How did it go? It may be that you send out an email later and say, hey, was there anything that you feel like we didn't do well or that you wanted to make sure we covered? It may be just talking with people. Documentation would be whether you're documenting it in your own notes, giving that information to someone like minutes after a meeting. But all 3 of these are important when we're talking ending up or completing a meeting or a workshop, as they called it. All right, any questions about those? Now we're going to get into the biggie, the test taking tips. We're going to go through all of these and then we're going to practice them. So, reading the question, and I've said this to you guys many times, probably every week. Reading the question is probably the most important thing. Well, that and reading all the answers. But remember, this is going to be on a computer, so you can cover the answer with your hand. You can put literally, literally put your hand up on the computer if you need to, because you need to ask, what is this question asking? Because, and I don't think they're doing it to try to trick you, maybe they are, but sometimes you can read a question and misread it, and one of the answers that is wrong would match that misread. So make sure that you read the question and understand the question first. You can rephrase it in your own language. So if I said to you, knowing that you are a person in Ohio, what is your favorite kind of candy? Rephrase it and say, okay, I'm in Ohio. What's my favorite kind of candy? I just totally made that up. I don't know. But if you rephrase it, just like we were talking earlier about rephrasing, you might be able to understand it a little bit better. And then again, we still have the answers covered up. What do I know about this? Maybe you already know what the answer is just by looking at the question. And there's going to be a lot of them that are like that. You read the question, you're like, oh, I know that answer. Let me just find it down here. Then, after you've done all 4 of these things, then you look at the answer and mentally, because again, we don't write on the computers, mentally mark out the ones that you know it's not the answer. You can almost always narrow it down to 2 answers. And 50% is better than 25%. So take that step if you have to. Now, if you get to this, what do I know about that? And you already know what the answer is, then find that answer. But if you're still trying to figure it out, do your best to narrow it down to 2. And then when you look at these 2, what do I know about that? You can almost always get it down to 2. And we're gonna look at that. Sometimes they have clue words in the question. If you look at the answers and there's 2 that are opposite, not always, but often one is correct. So if it says, you know, trying to think of something that would be opposites. the best way to play with this game is, um, you know, logically on, uh, you know, quietly off. Well, on and off are opposites. I bet one of those is going to be the answer. That was really poor example. But look and see if there's answers that are opposites. They love these words in the questions. So I'm going to tell you to always look for these words in the questions. And then when you look at the answers, if they have these words in the answers, they're, especially in our field, it's probably not correct. Not always. This one is kind of that opposite of that. If these kinds of things are in the answer, these are more likely to be correct. Because we know when we talk about working in a community, there's very few things that are always. This one I think is funny, but it is so true, and I've seen it play out. Look for grammatical clues. So you might have a question that is the beginning of a sentence, and then the answer is supposed to be the end of that sentence. Sometimes grammatically they don't line up, and you can look to see which one actually lines up. I don't know. Again, you can't write on the computers, but they will give you scrap paper. You can write on that scrap paper. So that if there are words that you're like, oh, universal. Oh, yeah, that's a word that I know. Or, excuse me. Yes, yeah. Just make sure that you are pulling out some of those special words. This is another one that they use sometimes, degrees of correctness. So the answer or the question may include the word most. Which one of these most represents blah, blah, blah. Means there's probably going to be answers that will be correct, but they're not the most, which is frustrating. I know. All right. So a reminder, before we look at some of these, we're going to go through a bunch of practice ones. But before we look at these, I'm going to put this in the chat, but I will also, it's in the slides here. If you want to pay, I've had people ask me, should I pay for the practice test? If you really feel like you want to, you can. It's $50. I think that, using this practice test, let me see, I should check because they at one point did change this. Let me just check here. It still works that way. What I was going to show you, I'll show you this real quick. So if for some reason you're like, I'm at the doctor's waiting for 30 minutes, I don't remember those links. If you go to the OCAM website, go to credentialing process and go to test prep. There are some links here, and this one right here, the Ohio Certified Prevention Credential Practice Exam, is the link to that online free practice test. You can take it 100 times. And I've had people do that. Because, again, there are some of us on here who never took a computer test in school. They didn't have computers at my school. They had 5, and it was only to be used in the computer lab. So sometimes just practicing taking them online helps. All right, so let's start this out. And this is going to be, everything's going to be up. As previously, I would not have the answers up. Everything's going to be up, kind of like it would be on the test. So you're planning to use a proven evidence-based program, but realize it is not feasible to implement all the program components. Don't look at the answers yet. What is this question asking you?
You are planning to use an evidence-based program, but you may not be able to implement all of it.
That was a perfect example of paraphrasing. You didn't add anything in, because I know we do that a lot. We, add in things that we know. That's all the question is asking. You want to do an evidence-based program, but you can't figure out how to do all of it. So now let's look over at some of well, first of all, do you know what the answer might be before you even look at the answers? Before you look at the answers, Kathleen and Elise, you looked at the answers and said 2. Don't look at the answers yet. So we know that if it's evidence-based, that means somebody created it, right? We know that while we are all very smart people, we can't just change things willy-nilly, right? So we're probably looking at how do we figure out the evidence-based piece where it's not us making a decision. So now we can look at the answers. So we've got not proceed at all with your choice, consult with the program and developers to determine potential impact, go ahead as most programs can be modified to meet local conditions or circumstances, and add additional alternatives to fill out the missing components. There's 2 on here that seem to be kind of the exact opposite, right? We've got not proceed at all and go ahead as most programs can be modified to meet. Those are pretty much the opposites. So we know neither one of those is going to work, because not proceeding at all and changing things on our own, those are not going to work. We did hear from the lovely Kathleen and Elise that this one might be the best option. Do we agree with that? Because it is the right one. Now, we all know in practicality and in reality, most of the time people don't do this. But we're not talking about what happens in reality. We're talking about what is the you should do. All right, let's look at this next one. Again, don't look at the answers. Prevention strategy aimed at informing broad segments of society. So what are some things we know in that question? What do you notice, or what are some words, or?
A prevention strategy that is broad, so that's not specific.
Okay, very good. Yep. Broad, yep. So does anybody know what, before we even look at the answers, I know you guys are looking, don't look at them. What's a broad segment? Do we have any prevention words that mean broad segments? Society.
Universal.
Yeah. So before we even looked over here, we've got a pretty good idea of what the answer is, right? So now let's look at the answers. We've got universal, selective, indicated, risk and protective approach. Now looking at these, let's say you have 0 clue. Is there any that you would mark out?
Indicated and selective.
Okay. Why?
Just because that doesn't give broad. to me. It doesn't give a wide area. Like indicated means they're pointed out and selective mean they're handpicked. So I would just
Okay.
use context clues if I
Okay.
didn't know the answer.
I might also get rid of that one because that's totally different kind of thing than these, right? This is an approach and these are interventions. But yes, you guys are all right that selective and indicated I would also mark out. So you probably already knew that answer before we went over there, but I just want to kind of walk you through how you would do that. All right. Here's one of the ones that catches people. What question should be asked at the highest level of prevention evaluation? What word is highlighted in this question?
Highest.
Highest. Yes. So that is what we really need to focus on. What does that tell you about the answers?
That they're probably all right in a way.
Yes. There's going to be some degree of rightness in all of these. But we're looking at what would be the highest level. So what does that mean to you? Highest level of prevention evaluation? It's a really weird question. Imagine you're in a helicopter and you're on the ground and you can see all the people and you go higher. You see more people and you go higher. You see like little ants of people and go higher. That's kind of what we're talking about with the highest. Kind of how many people are reached. So when we're talking about the highest level of prevention evaluation, we're talking about getting all the way up in that helicopter. So now let's look at the answers. Did community-wide behaviors change? Did intended participants attend regularly? Did program participants' behavior change? Did participants' attitudes change, or did self-esteem improve? Is there any of those that you're like, that's nowhere near the highest? There's one that is an process, not an outcome evaluation measure.
The one that says, did intended participants attend regularly?
Yeah, exactly.
That's very narrow, yeah.
It's very narrow. Whether they attended or not doesn't tell us anything about whether they are going to change their behavior, right? They could attend every single one and never change their behavior. Now, this is where people get caught up because they start thinking, well, if they attend all of them, they're going to change their behavior. So, of course, that's a great one. But just read the words that are there. Did they attend regularly? That's not it. Okay. So now we've got the community-wide behaviors, program participant behaviors, and attitudes and self-esteem improve. We need to go back to this highest. So of these, we don't want to look at just participants. So this one says participants and this one says participants. We want to look at the whole community because when you get up really high in that helicopter, you can't see individual people. All you can see is the community. Does that make sense? 2 thumbs up. Are you saying holy cow because you can't believe you got it right, or holy cow because that's a hard question? Because that makes a difference.
I knew this question already, but I had never looked at the participants and the participants. where you mark that off, that never occurred to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So again, the highest, when we're looking at this question, the highest part of that question, the word highest, is the most important part. So I guess I would not be one to be up in a helicopter really high because I'm terrified of heights. But if you're really high, you're not going to see individual people. You're going to see the whole community. Now, could this be an evaluation piece? Heck yeah. Behavior change? Heck yeah. That's absolutely a behavior or a evaluation piece. And attitudes change or self-esteem improve? Yeah. But it's not the highest. So remember when we read this question and saw that word, we knew that there probably was going to be multiple ones that were correct, but we wanted to find the highest. All right, let's look at this next one. An example of indicated prevention strategy is, so before we look at any of the answers, can anybody give me an example or tell me what indicated prevention strategy is?
When I think of indicated, I think of hand selected. So very specific.
Why?
Because, I mean, actually, because universal is so broad, I just think of it as the opposite.
Okay, so why are we hand selecting these people?
Well, like in my role and what we talk about like on our team is because there's a behavior, there is a something that is sticking out.
That's the piece right there.
Okay.
Because selective, you're still selecting them, but it's because of a risk factor. Indicated is because there's a behavior they have indicated by their behavior that there's something going on. So but that was fabulous the way we just got there, Crystal. That was really good to talk that out. Thank you for talking that out that way. So we're looking at something that is impacting a behavior that we are seeing. That's going on. So let's look at our answers. We've got the student assistance program, media campaign, school assemblies, social norm program. Now, as Crystal so eloquently put it, universal is kind of the opposite of indicated, sort of. Is there any of these that would be more universal?
School assemblies,
Media campaign.
media campaign.
Media campaigns. Anything else?
I think the social norm program. I don't really know what that is though.
That's basically saying the norm in our community is to not smoke. So be like the rest of us. That would be a social norm program or campaign. All of these are way more universal, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is a student assistance program?
Hey. Okay, so we're here talking about it. I'm fortunate. Me and Elise, we have I have someone to consult. So we're thinking the student assistance program is the indicated prevention because it's specifically for students that need assistance. So it's indicated, it's more specific, is what we're thinking.
And you would be right. A student assistance program is for students who are starting to have some kind of behaviors, and we want to try to assist them getting back on track. So, absolutely. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's look at our next one. Mobilizing community members to participate in a community prevention effort is an example of. So what are there any funky words in this or anything that kind of stands out? Absolutely, mobilizing. That's one of those words that you're like, okay, mobilizing. We're going to mobilize community
That was
members.
Elise. Elise was like, type mobilizing. Hurry up, type mobilizing.
So what does that mean? Mobilizing.
Gathering, getting together, like collaborative, coalition.
Getting people moving.
Okay. All right. So we're going to look at an example of getting people together, getting them moving, getting them collaborating. We got community readiness, problem prioritization, coalition building, or community needs assessment. What's community readiness?
I picture getting ready for the 4th of July parade or something.
Well, I mean, you can picture that. That's not in this instance, that's not what it is. Shannon, did you have another answer?
I think that would be like the step before like gathering, like determining if they're ready to proceed.
Yeah. So community readiness, is this community even ready to handle this situation? So that's why, if you remember back to when you signed up for this study group, I said something about, ready to take the test by the end of the year, because we don't want people in this study group taking space from someone who's not ready to take the test for 2 years. Same thing is kind of true with this. Is the community ready? Do they understand that it's an issue? Is that mobilizing?
No.
It's really just finding out if they're ready. Let's also look at the community needs assessment. What is that?
To me, that's a way to find out if the community is.
Yeah, so we're just finding out information. So for both A and D, you could sit there and say, well, you got to do that to be able to mobilize. So maybe that's the answer. This is where we, again, make sure you're just reading the answer and just reading the question. So we're down to problem prioritization and coalition building. What's problem prioritization?
Understanding what the problem is and being able to fit it.
I'm really struggling to hear what you're saying there.
I think of it as being understanding what the problem is and being able to bring that problem to like the forefront or make sure that the problem gets taken care of first.
So most of what you said. Problem prioritization is just which problem is the most important. Is that mobilizing? No. Now, again, people will say, oh, we're doing problem prioritization. We're mobilizing people around that problem. That's not what it says. It just says problem prioritization. So the only one left is coalition building. Does that feel like that's mobilizing? And you guys probably all got there way before that, but I just wanted to take us through every one of those so that we kind of saw that one. Okay. Maybe a simple one. Archival data is. What is archival data? You guys give me a definition of that.
I look at archival data as something that someone has already gotten the data from.
Yeah.
And, um, I, I missed this and I shouldn't have, but I did. Because I also look at archival data, and I guess this is how I was told. Archival data is anything that, it's got a lot of numbers in it. No, I'm wrong. I was thinking quantitative instead of archive. If, and
Well,
I
can
don't know
archival
why.
be quantitative or qualitative?
Yes, it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think the first thing you said was perfect. It's something that people have already gathered the data for. This is going to be one of those things where where all the answers are, we'll see. So the first one, information from a large number of individuals. Is that archival data? It could be. Could archival data be from a small number of individuals? Yeah, okay. Information contained in public records. Okay. What about hard to find? Is archival data hard to find? Maybe. I see some of you going, oh, maybe it could be. Is it collected from surveys? Jana says, maybe. Maybe. The only one that is completely true, and this is where I could be somebody who would look at this and say, oh, I'm just going to answer A right away. But make sure you read through everything, because the only one that is always true is B. Does that make sense? We got another
Yeah,
one.
I like how you did that. The one that's always true. Because I was a
Yeah.
little stuck there for a second, like, But yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I use this one. And also why I use this next one. Key informant interviews as a method of data collection. So this is like the first half of a sentence. What are some things we see in this question? We'll call it a question.
Like using interviews as a method of getting data.
Okay, so interviews is one of the things we see in here.
Being informant to me.
Key?
Okay. Key informant. You guys both said that. Yeah. What does that mean? What is a key informant?
Someone credible?
It might be. If I'm going to go into your community, I want to find out who are the main people that I need to talk to. Remembering that sometimes it's Aunt Sue who sits on her porch and talks to everybody who walks by.
But she could be biased.
She could be biased. Exactly. But she knows a lot of information. So we're talking about talking to those people who know a lot about the community as an interview. So we're going to figure out what's their question or what's the answer to this here. So key informant interviews as a method of data collection eliminate the possibility of bias in collection information. Is that true? No, that whole term bias, like we said, Aunt Sue on the porch might have bias. Can be done by anyone. Could any of us go into a community and interview people? Maybe. Okay, we'll hold off on that one. Provide in-depth information about community needs. Okay, Kathleen saying yes. Does it always? So maybe. Do not take much time. Do key informant interviews take a lot of time? Let's schedule it for next Tuesday. Oh, wait, next Tuesday comes and we can't do it. Then we'll schedule for this time. And then the actual interview takes an hour and a half. I mean, it's going to take you some time to do it, right? So really the only one left, whoops, is B. Because the reality is anybody can do a key informant interview. You're just talking to someone. Now, it may end up that there's bias in it because of who you are and who you're talking to. So again, we know back A is not correct. And, it may provide in-depth information. It may not. So it's not always true, but it's always true that it can be done by anybody. Now, you and I both know that there are some people who should not be doing these, but when we're looking at answers for the test, I got one more. A goal statement. What is a goal statement? We're talking about the program that you do, and I say, what is your goal? What is your goal statement? What would that be?
What you want to accomplish,
Okay.
the end
And
result.
yeah. Okay. So, so here's our possibilities. Provides general purpose, direction, and desired outcomes. Specifies what and when something is to be accomplished. Identifies who will do what tasks, and is the same as a mission statement. So first, let's look at this mission statement. What is a mission statement? Because you see the word statement here and here, so you might first think on that one. So vision statement is what we want to see in the future. Mission statement, think of military. What is your mission? Or mission impossible. What is your mission? How are you going to get there? So while they sound kind of the same, is a goal statement and a mission statement the same thing? No, it's not. All right, let's look at, so that marked out. Identified who will do what tasks. Does a goal statement tell us who will do what tasks? No. No, that's getting way more specific. If your goal statement is reduction of 10% of high school seniors saying that they drank alcohol, does that tell you who's going to do it? No. What about what and when? Does that tell you what and when? I know this is
Me
a
and
hard
Lisa
one.
are torn. We're torn between A and B.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That what and when be more of like an objective or no?
Yes. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And this is where I came from a treatment side of things, writing
Yeah.
treatment plans. And that's where I knew the difference. That's the only reason I really understand the difference here. So a what and when might be, so if your goal statement is 10% reduction in seniors drinking alcohol, a what and when might be completion of 15 sessions of life skills by Kathleen Burkhart. That's our what and when. So that's not our goal statement. But the general purpose and direction of what our desired outcomes is, we want a reduction I didn't say purpose in that one, but what our outcome is. Our outcome is a reduction in alcohol use by seniors. So that would be that one. Does that make sense? All right, we're going to go through. Let's say you've got the test in 3 hours. If you've only got 3 hours, these are the things I want you to focus on. The CADCA primers. I know it's not everyone's favorite thing, but the CADCA primers is going to help you. They're in the separate folders in that Google folder, or you can just literally Google CADCA primers and they will all come up in one spot. What I might focus mostly on is the glossary in these, which if you're someone who likes to do the cram, the website that was the cram, that's what is on there, is all the glossaries in the back. If you only have 3 hours, look at the logic model words on page 25 in this book. They have a lovely chart that shows you those words like goals, strategies, target population or target group, if then statements, short-term and long-term outcomes. Look through that chart. The next one, and this is kind of peppered all through the book, so I couldn't really pick a particular page, but know what these words mean. So things like written surveys or questionnaires. It's not that it's going to say, what is a questionnaire? But a questionnaire, just like we just saw, might be one of the answers. So just know that a questionnaire or a written survey is just a group of questions. An interview would be us talking. And while it may have some questions, there may also be some chance for discussion. Tests and assessments. So do you know what, well, just pre and post tests a lot of times are tests of knowledge. We're looking at knowledge here. Observations is where you're just looking at a room and observing what's going on. Focus group is where you are bringing a group of people that have a particular characteristic. So maybe you're doing a focus group of teens in this community to see what they like, or of parents. You're just doing focus group. Case studies is where maybe you're looking at some observations, interviews, and surveys from a previous situation. Document and program record reviews, that would be archival data, looking at information that's already around. And this would be archival data too, existing databases and archives. So again, just if you see those words in a question, know what those words mean. This is for my old people here. That's the only reason I put this up. Basic prevention theory issues. And I know you guys know these, just make sure you understand things like universal, selective, and indicated. We just talked about those and you saw how that came up in a question. That continuum of care, that's that protractor. It's not going to make you list what goes in what, but if it asks about, it might use that term in a question. Risk and protective factors theory. So things like when looking at a community, which of the following might be a risk factor? Or which of the following might be a protective factor? Risk factor puts people at higher risk for problem behaviors. Protective factors protect them from high risk behaviors. Resiliency approach is just talking about, those things that you can put um, into practice that help build that resiliency, which goes back to protective factors. Developmental assets, same kind of thing, talks about the protective factors. The 6 CSAP strategies, make sure you remember those. I might also add in here the 4 Ps: price, product, promotion, placement. So that's what I would do if I were looking at the last 3 hours before a test. Once you turn in your application, then it's the waiting game. The board will look at it. They'll let you know if there's changes needed. And it doesn't look, let me see. What do you mean? You know what? This may be an AI picture because you're right. That doesn't look like Mr. Howell. I'll have to look at that again. Anyways, turning that application. So the application is when you go on e-license and you submit your grid with all the stuff on it and all your certificates. They're gonna come back with something. I think in my, whatever it's been, what years is, in my 8 years of doing OCAM work, for an OCPS, I've maybe had 3 people get it approved on the first time. So don't be upset if it gets sent back to you. It's gonna get sent back for something. So you fix it. You reach out to Jennifer and you say, what in the world are they asking for? Because it's gonna be in legalese. It's gonna be in some funky language, and you're like, what are they even asking for? We'll read through it, we'll figure it out. Eventually, you'll get the email that says you are approved to take the test. At that point, you just sit and wait, because our board then will send your information to IC and RC. And then IC and RC will send you an email with testing options. Hang on to that question, Shannon. I will come right back to that. When IC and RC send you that testing options, then you sign up for place and the time you can, remembering that one of the options is proctored at home, if that's something you want to do. Now, CE Broker, it's the bane of my existence. CE Broker is only used for renewals. When they are going to renew applications to move up to the next credential, they don't even look at CE Broker. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but whatever is included in your application, that is the only thing they're going to look at. Also, remember, you're going to have to send your transcripts. Even if none of your classes are used, you have to send your transcripts, because to take the test, you have to at least have an associate's. So you're going to have to send your transcripts no matter what. And where you send your transcripts is, I mean, I can always give you this, but I'm going to show you where you find it, because this is maybe the hardest thing to find. You go to their contact us, and right here, it tells you where to have the transcript sent. Most of the time, you can just go to your college, pay whatever it is. I don't even know what it is nowadays, and have them sent to that email address. Do it at the same day that you turn in your e-license stuff, because I have had the board, somebody turned it in and then 3 months later turned in her application and they couldn't match them up. Once you turn in your stuff on e-license, your supervisor needs to turn in their stuff. So you will, you'll have to give them your application number for them to do it.
So I have a question, Jennifer.
Yeah.
What if you already have a copy of your transcript from your college, from your degree?
So
What if
imagine this.
you
Imagine you are a person who does not play fair and they just
have-
create a transcript and
Mhm.
send it straight from them to the board. Do you think the board should accept that?
I mean, I do.
Well,
But I mean, it
but
comes, they can always check it. They can call, I mean, they can
they're not going
verify
to do, they don't want to do that.
person.
They want it to come straight from the college.
Okay. All right. So that
I know.
have to come straight from the college. Okay. I
I
just
know.
had to do it before and yeah. Okay.
I know. But
Which transcript, like the highest degree or?
so here's what I'll say about that. If you are using any classes, let's say you're using classes from your bachelor's degree, but you have a master's, I would only send the bachelor's because you only need to have an AA. But if you're not sending any, if you're not using any of your classes on your grid, then yeah, either one. It
I
doesn't
think I'm
matter.
probably too old. How far back does it go?
Well, so half of your hours of the 120 hours of education you need, half of them need to be within the last 5 years, which means the other half can be 100 years ago. However, the board is requiring a syllabus for any college classes that you are using. That's the hard part.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not about how old the college classes are, because I graduated college in 94. I could use up to 60 hours from that, but there's no way I can get syllabus from that,
Yeah, no.
So unfortunately, I am here if you want to, if let's say you've got your grid and you want to send it to me and say, how's this look? The easiest thing is if you send me your grid and your certificates, because sometimes people put it in the wrong spot and we have to move it around. But then we can look at it and say, oh, you only need 3 more hours in this section. Here's a self-paced free course you can take to fill that. So use me for right now. Okay, I'm still paying for it, so use it until you lose it, I guess. I want to help you. I want you to be, I don't want this to be a frustrating process. And it is a frustrating process. I understand that. So I want it to be as easy as I can make it. Because literally what I do is I put a show on Netflix or something on my one monitor and I work on your grid on the other. I have fun with it. I'm a dork, I know. So don't feel bad about it. And I get paid for that. I probably don't bill as much as I should, but that's a whole other story. We did mention these resources before. Don't forget you can rewatch all these videos. I've had some people listen to them. Don't watch them while you're driving, but you can listen to them while you're driving. And one person said she could hear my voice while she was taking the test. I'm like, oh, great. But you always have those. You always have access to the Google folders, which I'm going to send you all that again. And seriously, if like I had someone reach out and say, I saw a discrepancy in these 2 questions and we talked it through. So don't feel like you're out there alone. I will be honest with you that you may say, oh, don't you remember me? I was in your study group. I might remember you. I might not. I'm old. I forget. So don't assume that I remember where I know you from, but you can always reach out and say, hey, help me out with this. But seriously, think you guys all have my email. But and you are welcome to text me. Just tell me who you are. I get texts sometimes. I'm like, I don't know who you are, but okay. Sure, I'll answer your question. Any other questions? I'll also put in here real quick. This is the link to make an appointment if you want to chat about something. Again, what the easiest thing would probably be make an appointment and then send me your grid ahead of time so I can look at it and we can make that meeting most effective. And then let me know if and when you
Oh.
pass the test because I want to know. I want to celebrate you. Yes, Kathleen.
Do you have a blank grid?
Yes.
Because the one online, it kept like when you put something in, it kept like it was. I think you had a better grid when I used it last time. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I have a Word version.
Okay. Can you
I'm putting
wanna
it in
email
the
it to me?
chat. Wait a second. Stop. Sorry, I'm talking to the. There it is. Put it in the chat, but I'll also remind myself to. Now they have changed the A grid. They have not changed the S grid yet, but it's easy to switch over if we need to at any point, anyways. So, all right. I want to celebrate you though. Seriously, when you pass, dance and scream and holler, and then email me.